Good afternoon and welcome to the August 22nd, 2019 work session of the Henrico County School Board. Before we proceed with the meeting, I would like to note that Mr. Montgomery is not here this afternoon. He and his family are on a much-deserved vacation. Item 1.01, approval of agenda. Now, board members, you have seen the agenda for today's work session. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Nay. The ayes have it. The agenda is approved. Item 2.01, closed session. The next item on the agenda is for the board to enter into a closed meeting to discuss matters covered under item A1 of section 2.2-3711 of the Code of Virginia 1950 as amended pertaining to the assignment, appointment, performance, disciplining, and release of contract for specific school board employees. Is there a motion to enter into closed meeting?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. The ayes have it. We're now in closed session. Board members, we need to certify that only those items noted for discussion in closed meeting were in fact items discussed during closed meeting. Was there a motion to certify the closed meeting?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The closed meeting has been certified. Madam Superintendent.
Thank you, Reverend Cooper. For the first item, the superintendent is seeking the board's approval for the appointment of administrative personnel for the 2019-2020 school year.
Board members, you've heard the superintendent's recommendation regarding the appointment of administration personnel. Is there a motion to approve the appointment of administration personnel for the 2019-2020 school year?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The appointment of administration personnel has been approved. Dr. Caswell.
Thank you. The board has just approved Mandy Mulholland as educational specialist for early learning preschool, and we will have her here to be introduced later this evening as note at the next meeting. And this evening, you'll have an opportunity to meet the many individuals who were appointed at our last work session. So we'll look forward to meeting our new administrators. All right, for the next item, we have a back-to-school update prepared for the board to get a sneak peek at what's new this school year, as well as what our priority areas are. So Dr. Tigan and Dr. Hughes are here to present that update for us.
Good evening, Vice Chairman, members of the board, and Dr. Cashwell. Dr. Hughes and I are thrilled to be here with you this afternoon to talk about the work that has been done this summer in preparation for our students returning on September 3rd. The vision for 2019-2020 is to create a culture of excellence. And to help us attain this vision, our focus this evening will be sharing information on these topics: the implementation of the Henrico Learner Profile and Deeper Learning Model, literacy across all grade levels, differentiated instruction for our students with disabilities, social-emotional learning, ensuring alignment of assuring alignment of practices with the culturally responsive education model that was adopted, enhancing hands-on inquiry-based science opportunities, and personalizing professional learning for all of our learners. As we've worked to fully implement the Henrico Learner Profile and Deeper Learning Model, we are moving to each elementary school having a dedicated ILC, Instructional Learning Coach. The instructional learning coaches will work with principals to develop professional development opportunities and coaching opportunities for teachers around the attributes and skills of the Henrico Learner Profile and the 4 pillars of the Deeper Learning Model. They will also join grade level teams to ensure the infusion of the HLP and DLM in their daily lesson plans. Professional learning and leadership is expanding impact teams to 15 additional schools this year. These schools will join the 9 that implemented impact teams last year. They're focusing on student-centered instruction through the incorporation of both the Henrico Learner Profile and the Deeper Learning Model into classroom instruction to support student learning and teacher leadership. Teaching, Learning, and Innovation has revamped the core curriculum to include project-based learning. Through project-based learning, students develop deep content knowledge as well as critical thinking, collaboration, creativity, and communication skills in the context of doing authentic, meaningful projects. Project-based learning unleashes a contagious creative energy among students and teachers. And last of all, throughout the summer, the educational specialists have been providing professional development for our teachers, and through that, they have been modeling the tenets of the Deeper Learning Model.
Okay, so good evening. As Dr. Tagan noted, the first focus area for 2019-2020 is K-12 literacy. As the board will recall, Amy's passport identified revisiting the K-12 literacy plan as an opportunity for growth. The passport specifically stated to ensure schools have the tools, resources, and staffing for struggling readers to receive appropriate intervention and instruction. To meet this area of growth, specialists in the Department of Teaching, Learning, and Innovation, along with focus groups of teachers and administrators, gathered feedback to determine areas of strength and need within the curriculum, teacher capacity, and assess our current resources. Specialists began by continuing to develop a viable language arts and English curriculum aligned to the 2017 state standards. During 2018-2019, the K-2 curriculum was written and implemented. This school year, the 3-5 curriculum was written and will be implemented. All K-5 curriculum includes a comprehensive literacy approach to including whole group instruction, guided reading, literacy extensions, and writing. To ensure teachers have the understanding to deliver the new standards, professional learning on the new curriculum was provided over the summer. Improvements were also made to the middle school curriculum that was implemented this school year based on teacher feedback. Teachers at select middle schools also participated in the Struggling Readers Academy, which was offered to us by UVA, to provide middle school teachers with the necessary understanding of how to provide instruction to struggling middle school students. Performance tasks and performance-based assessments designed to provide students opportunities to engage in real-world thinking will continue to be added in the curriculum. Culturally relevant lessons centered around literature were included to ensure opportunities existed for teachers to be culturally responsive to students. Specific to elementary, phonics and phonemic awareness, which are basic and crucial tenets of students learning to read, were also enhanced in the curriculum. As we continue to build capacity with teachers on literacy instruction, we need to empower teachers to meet the needs of their students during guided reading daily by carefully focusing on the skills, strategies, and best practices contained in the literacy model, which is outlined in the JAM plan, which is a planning guide. Building teacher capacity to understand flexibility to differentiate and meet the needs of their students remains a priority. Best practices around professional development for literacy and instruction and resources will continue to be a priority for our department. As stated in the previous slide, K-12 literacy teachers provided feedback on the desire to have more instructional resources needed to provide quality literacy instruction. As a first step, the systematic intervention in phonological awareness, phonics and sight word, which is known as SIPS, that program was purchased for each elementary school. SIPS is a structured literacy approach to foundational skills instruction through explicit instructional routines focused on phonological awareness, spelling, and sight words. This resource will be provided to interventionists with the tools, and they will provide them with the tools they need to enhance literacy instruction, specifically for students who are at the early stages of reading or struggling with those beginning reading skills. Literacy footprints, which was developed by Jan Richardson, are leveled readers with accompanying lesson plans that can be used in guided reading. Beginning in the fall, a needs inventory will be conducted by reading coaches to identify current resources already in each building. Following those results, staff will begin a strategic phase-in of additional literacy footprints within the division. Middle school teachers specifically requested more classroom libraries to better ensure resources were available to provide targeted literacy instruction. In collaboration with the Director for Equity and Diversity, books were selected to provide teachers and students a greater variety of literature to engage in during instruction. In addition, a Mirrors and Windows library, which Dr. Tigan will discuss later, is available for all teachers 6 through 12 to enrich cultural conversations and provide literacy experiences. Nearpod, which can be used in any subject K-12, is an engaging digital platform with interactive lessons that can be used to complement literacy instruction, and it's currently in the final stages with purchasing to procure for use within the division this school year. As you can see, the division has thoughtfully chosen resources based on teacher feedback to support literacy instruction and enhance student achievement. A few weeks ago, Donna Davenport, Director of Exceptional Education, provided the board with 4 focus areas for exceptional education for the 1920 school year, which are shown on the screen. If the board will recall, these 4 focus areas came out of the findings from a special education audit that identified 27 areas of need, and then 5 work groups examined those areas during the 2018-2019 school year. A culmination of the 5 groups' work was streamlined into these current 4 goals. Work has already begun in these focus areas to ensure the continuation of comprehensive and effective services for students, access to a viable curriculum for all students, re-imaging the Virginia Randolph Education Center, and optimizing communication to maximize engagement. As critical paths continue to be developed and goals with assessment measures are incorporated, the board will continue to receive updates on specific progress. Social emotional learning is another area of focus. As the board is aware, the Henrico Learner Profile focuses learning on the whole child and provides key proficiencies students need to be life-ready. It is important for staff to ensure students are prepared both academically and through the lens of their social emotional needs. Once again, teacher feedback indicated they did not have the necessary tools and resources to provide adequate SEL instruction. To assist teachers, the social emotional resources on the screen were or will be purchased this school year to assist. It is important to note that the pre-K program has been using the Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning program, which is acronym CASEL, for some time. Sanford Harmony, a K-5 SEL program, will be implemented in all K-5 classrooms this year. Teachers received professional development on the implementation of the program this summer, and principals were provided guidance as well. Sanford Harmony empowers students to communicate, cooperate, connect, embrace diversity, and resolve conflict. Second Step, which is a social emotional program for 6th through 8th graders, has been in 3 middle schools this past year and builds the same social emotional tenets as Sanford Harmony. Based on feedback, all middle schools will receive Second Step this school year. Both of these programs span a student-centered focus aligned to the HLP. High school students receive SEL through the content areas and specifically during advisory in some schools. An advisory curriculum will be developed this school year to ensure high school teachers have the resources needed to ensure SEL instruction as well. Expanding science and STEAM is another focus area. The science curriculum was enhanced to include inquiry-based science, hands-on learning, integrated content, discourse and scaffolding, and STEAM, all focused around science concepts and standards. These enhancements bring science to life and ensure STEAM concepts are woven into instruction. To ensure teachers are prepared to provide quality instruction woven with those STEAM concepts, we continue and will continue to provide teachers professional development, offer community partner workshops such as Project Wild, Watershed Education, Project Learning Tree, and the Be Wise Project. Again, feedback from teachers included not having the necessary resources to provide quality science and STEAM instruction. STEAM kits will be purchased for schools who currently do not have STEAM teachers to ensure supplies are available for teachers to provide those STEAM-enriched lessons. The kits will provide consumables such as construction paper, glue, and tape, as well as maker space types of resources like Go Robert Mouse, which is a STEM coding resource. In addition, schools will be provided with funds to purchase consumables or manipulatives based on their needs for that hands-on learning. AP Biology and AP Environmental Science books are in the procurement stage of purchasing and will be provided to schools as soon as we are able. As you can see, a great deal of feedback was solicited from teachers and administrators to ascertain where gaps were with resources necessary to teach quality reading and science instruction. Professional learning was and will continue to be provided as resources are purchased to ensure our teachers are prepared. As we move into the 2020-2021 school year, staff in the Division of Learning will continue to solicit feedback to ensure teachers have what they need. At this time, I'll turn the presentation back over to Dr. Tigan.
Dr. Manns has introduced the culturally responsive education model with district-level staff and has plans to continue to collaborate with teaching, learning, and innovation as they work to create culturally responsive curriculum. Unconscious bias and microaggression training is being provided for school-based instructional staff this year, with plans to have 70% of our teachers trained by June 2020. Dr. Manns has also purchased class sets of novels that act as mirrors and windows, as Dr. Hughes mentioned earlier. A mirror is a story that reflects one's own culture and helps students build their identity. A window is a resource that offers students a view into someone else's experience. It is critical to understand that students cannot truly learn about themselves until they learn about others as well. Equity sponsors are now called Equity Champions, and these are adults in our high schools and ACE centers who are working with the leadership to review data, set an equity goal, and monitor this goal monthly through the VSIP process. Every high school also has an equity team and the equity ambassadors, and this year they will be working with the administration and the equity champions to support the equity work within the school. All staff are also expected to complete online training through Safe Schools. The training topics are cultural competence and racial bias, discrimination, and diversity awareness, both staff to staff and staff to student. They are to complete these modules by November 15th. These modules were released to teachers the first week in July to provide flexibility in when they completed their trainings following the anywhere, anytime philosophy. And as a reminder, our teachers had 2 evenings designated in the 2019-2020 calendar to complete this work. We provided our principals with a leadership roadmap for 2019-2020 with the vision I mentioned earlier to create a culture of excellence within our schools. Each of the quarterly meetings will focus on developing our leaders to be culture builders, wellness and self-care champions, and deeper learning leaders. These focus areas will be woven through the principal meetings as well. We are building upon the work that we began last year. The Life Ready Conference in June was equivalent to a national conference for our teachers. There were over 1,200 participants representing approximately 1/3 of our teachers from each of our schools. It was personalized learning at its best, with teachers and leaders having 406 different sessions from which to choose. Our data shows that the greatest attendance was seen for the sessions focused on wellness and self-care, leadership, and deeper learning. There was even student voice through a student panel that comprised of rising first graders through students who were completing their first year of college. I tell you, their feedback was priceless. The Life Ready 2 conference was a 4-day conference with every school represented. There were administrators, special ed teachers, and general education teachers in attendance, and they had over 160 additional professional development sessions from which to choose. These sessions included such topics as Tier 1 instruction, special education, social emotional health, behavior support, and family engagement. Most significant was the keynote speaker, Marilyn Friend. Her emphasis was on effective co-teaching and collaboration between educators. She focused on specially designed instruction, which refers to adapting as appropriate to the needs of the student, the content, methodology, or delivery of instruction. It certainly left our staff asking for more. And of course, this week, we welcome back our new teachers, new to the profession of education and those new to Henrico. We had over 400 new teachers, librarians, and counselors who chose to make Henrico their home. The energy has been high all week, and we look forward to welcoming the rest of our teachers back on Monday. And Dr. Hughes and I would like to thank you for this opportunity to share the work of our teams. They have put in many hours so our school-based staff can be prepared for the diverse needs of our students who will be all arriving on Tuesday, September 3rd. And we would be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Board members, do you have any questions or comments? I'll start with my right, and Ms. Cock can go left, if that's okay.
Okay. And thank you for presenting this update and bringing all the information into one place. I'm really excited because it looks as if, there's so many resources out there, and our Title I schools, have a lot of those resources because we make sure they do, and they're federally funded. And then you have other schools that have a wonderful and generous PTA or a PTO, or they have a great grant writer that helps them to get many of the resources. But there's always this swath in the middle that's under that radar that has the less than stellar book room and needs some of these things when we're talking about SIPs and such. And so I love the way this is really speaking to our looking through the lens of equity, and that we're making sure, or will ensure, that by the end of this year that all of our schools will have the resources that they need. And I greatly appreciate that. Now, there was one resource that I kept hearing in my district, and I didn't see it on the slide, and that was the AP U.S. History book, that needed to be up to date. I heard from staff, and I know we had mentioned it through when we've done some tours, but the AP History APUSH book was like 4 presidents behind and several major current court cases behind.
Yes, and that is in the process of being purchased as well. It just didn't fit on my science slides.
Okay.
Yes,
I know,
we've
you like
taken care of
science.
that one as well.
I'm a history girl. That's wonderful to hear, so thank you.
Is it over my head?
I'm done.
Thank you, Ms. Cock. Ms. Ogborn.
Okay, my turn. Can we go back to the third slide? Just a couple of questions, just so it makes sense. The impact team that you referred to, can you tell
Yes.
us who is on that impact team?
The impact teams are teachers from within the building, and they're usually working alongside an administrator. That could be an AP, or it could be the principal, and they're really working on truly developing a professional learning community where they talk about instructional units, then they'll actually go in and teach, and then they'll come back, they'll observe each other, and they'll come back and provide feedback and revise lessons based on that. Some of the teams are on one single content, like it may be a whole team of math teachers, and in other places it may be a team that's made up of different content areas. Maybe a math teacher, science teacher, a social studies, and an English.
Makes perfect sense. Having an impact on instruction, that's great. I like the name, too. And then the next one about literacy, I have several questions about that. The changes, you talked about phonics and phonemic awareness bringing, I'm just curious what we're adding in that world, because that's the world I came from, so.
Well, I think, over and over again, the teachers talked about that literacy block. And most of the feedback that we received was that while the teachers understood what needed to happen during that block, they felt like they truly did not have the resources that they needed to lift that up. So in some cases, they didn't have decodable text. In some cases, they didn't have what they needed to ensure all the components of guided reading looked like. So the K-12 literacy team, and in this case specifically the elementary specialist, carefully listened to that feedback, and she tried to go back and embed things in the curriculum that would help the teachers better provide that instruction. However, we all know that just embedding it into the curriculum isn't enough. So as we had professional learning this summer, we tried to really build the capacity of the teachers to understand what all of the components in the literacy block looked like, and then how we could help continue to build their capacity around that.
Because I echo what Mrs. Cox said about putting the resources and the materials, and that was
Right.
obviously in Amy's passport, and one of the goals that we set in developing our budget was
Sure.
putting more materials in the hands of teachers so that they didn't either have to make do
Right.
or borrow from each other and
Sure.
stretch those resources or do without.
Right.
And we had schools that, you know, just, we just didn't have it equally distributed. But the literacy footprints, I know you're doing sort of an assessment
Yes.
of where that is in the county, because Bev's absolutely right.
Right.
A lot of PTAs have purchased them now. And so,
Sure.
so when you get that information, if you could share that with us.
Oh, yes.
As to who has and who doesn't, and how many more we need, and that kind of thing. That'd be
Yes.
really, I think, valuable for us to
Yes.
know. So when we hear people talk about it,
Yes.
we're informed on that part. Go ahead, Dr.
I
Kathy.
just want to chime in that the reason we're determining who's got what is so that we can fill in the gaps. So we do plan to purchase any, for any school that does not have. And then since schools may have invested in the literacy footprints and feel like, well, maybe I'm not getting anything out of this, there are additional materials we will provide them for literacy.
Well, and like I said, that was one of the things we have talked about a lot is, you know, you hear teachers say, you've hired me to do this job, but you don't give me the things I need to do it. And knowing that we are listening to our teachers and trying to do that, to me is, you know, is the best news that's
Right.
embedded in here.
Yeah, it's very exciting.
That's how
It's
we
exciting
also
times.
keep our teachers with us.
You're right.
So I appreciate that and all the work you've done. Thank you.
Is that it, Ms. Agbo? Ms. Pike?
Yes, thank you for the report and all the information you provided. How are we doing with the instructional learning coaches? Do we have all those positions filled at the elementary school levels?
I'm looking at you. Are you referring to the 5 specific reading specialists or just instructional coaches in
The
general?
ILC.
ILC.
Oh, yes, I believe we're fully staffed in that area. Let me look at Francine to make sure. But we,
I was going to say,
oh, we're
I
one
knew there
short.
had been one that we were short, and I wasn't sure if they had been hired.
Okay. And with regard to the section that you mentioned regarding struggling students and the model for that, will there be a way to get to measure how they do during the course of a year?
Yes, so we have different measures, you know, growth measures that we can use. In elementary, we can look at the F&P. In middle school, we have some measures. We were just talking about that today, about looking at the middle school curriculum and really looking at some different measures that we can put in place throughout the English curriculum. But yes, certainly we can provide an update on the board with how well the students move after the teachers have that intervention, that professional learning. It's an excellent professional learning, and I think most middle school teachers, you know, are trained in English content and not necessarily trained on how students learn to read, much like elementary students. And so as students come to middle school and we find that more and more of them aren't prepared or aren't strong readers, it really does perplex some of our middle school teachers. So teachers who have already been able to participate in that have reported that they feel more equipped and are ready and excited to put those strategies in place. So we can certainly monitor the student success and report back to the board.
Okay, thank you. Along those same lines, in terms of social emotional learning, is there opportunity to measure how we do with that system-wide? I mean, is there a way to see how that impacts us on the daily operation of a school or daily operation of a classroom once that information is put into effect? I'm just curious how we might do that.
I think there's several measures. One will be looking at student discipline numbers, you know, because as students learn how to interact and have discourse among each other and settle conflict in a productive way, that we'll see a reduction in the number of behavior issues in schools, and specifically schools that might be PBIS schools and using the Swiss model. I think we'll have very specific data that will help with that. I think we'll also see it through some of our surveys, our climate surveys, as far as how students feel about schools, as far as, their social emotional safety within schools. And so we'll be able to look at that based on our baselines from this past year.
And just a couple more things. Regarding everything related to STEAM, that's so critical after the year that we went through and the decisions that we made as a board related to that. And I just hope that everything comes together for that and that all those pieces of that puzzle are there. It's just critical that we deliver
Sure.
and come through with that for our students and for our teachers. Because I think I'm sure our communities are watching
Yes.
how we're going to work with
Right.
that. So.
And I've been very proud of the specialists. They have worked tirelessly to ensure that STEAM is not only embedded in science, but embedded throughout every content area.
Right.
And just this summer, our elementary social studies specialist and our Elizabeth Kirk, who was our STEAM specialist now in ILC, they provided professional learning all summer to teachers about how STEAM could look in social studies, how STEAM can look in other areas. So we really are trying to spread it across the Division K-12 as an embedded component to all of our work.
Okay, that's good. And I've got one more for you that wasn't on there, but I'm thinking that it was buried in there somewhere. Do we know how we did with training that was provided for faculties at Freeman and Godwin related to block scheduling this summer?
I don't have specifics for you. I know that the principals worked with teachers throughout the summer,
Right.
providing opportunities for them to meet and be able to plan for that block, but I'm happy to bring back more information to you on that.
Okay, thank you. And thanks for everything that everybody's doing. Thanks.
I want to just echo my peers. Thank you, Dr. Tigan and Dr. Hughes and all the administration and staff for your hard work in preparing for a new school year. I want to kind of echo Mr. Pike. Dr. Hughes, you spoke in regards to one section specifically about goals with the assessment tools. And so I guess for me, with the K through 12 literacy kind of revision, how can we gauge and when you present maybe at the end of this year, begin next year, the progress? What's the rubric? What's the time frame in which once we implement these new changes, we're expecting a return on the investment, if you will?
Right.
Can you help me with that so I can visualize it?
Sure. Well, I would like to hope that we have given teachers some quick wins. While we know we haven't, gone deep into the weeds, we've scratched the surface of what the teachers have said to us they need immediately to provide quality instruction. And we have started to look closely at different types of assessments. Obviously, we have our SOL, which is our benchmark. We also have an F&P, in elementary school, which was relatively new to the teachers. They didn't have a lot of kits. We're trying to get more kits in their hands so that they can use that assessment with fidelity. So we're hoping we'll be able to see growth with the students on that. We've asked the teachers to look at different formative and summative assessments that can measure growth. Of course, in middle schools, we have course grades that we can, follow for English and for some of our, for English, 6 through 12. So I think we have to look at the data that we currently have in place and then look at some of the data that come with our new programs, such as SIPS is very closely related to PALS data. So I think we can look at beginning PALS data at the beginning of the year and then look at which students have had the opportunity to participate in that SIPS program to look to see if the PALS data would, change during the end of the year, and hopefully it will. Again, I think teachers felt like they just did not have the tools to properly intervene and properly assess students. So while some of this is new, I'm hoping that we will see gains and, forward movement. It's my hope that all of our schools are fully accredited, and I hope we've given them the tools that they need. And so while that's a minimum benchmark, that's something we're all looking for very closely, in addition to our other measures in literacy.
I appreciate that. Quick question. So this year I had the opportunity to go to Brooklyn Middle School, and they had a great program, a Supreme Court program.
Oh,
A few of
yes.
us went. So I was at the new teacher orientation, and the teacher that actually put that on has now been hired as an ILC at Fairfield. And he was just saying to me how excited he was, whereas before he had to toggle between teaching and doing that, but now in his new role,
Sure.
he's able to focus on providing that kind of experience
Right.
building wide. So
Sure.
I want to kind of congratulate us for ensuring
Yes,
that each elementary
absolutely.
school
Right.
does have an ILC, because, you know, with that just that mindset, that creativity, and that prism that we look through, I think it was going to benefit the school. And
Absolutely.
so what's the parallel for our middle schools? How do those, the ILCs in elementary and middle school, is there any kind of collaborative functioning or anything of that nature?
Right. Well, as you know, the role of the ILC, the role has changed. And so it is our hope that as they switch into a role where they're coaching teachers more, in middle school especially, but in elementary now they have that dedicated planning time, that the ILCs can really take point and help teachers unpack the curriculum. What does that look like? How do I coach teachers to look at their data? What can we say are the strengths and the weaknesses of our students, and how can we help move them forward? So I think we have an employee group that we can leverage like never before, who can really help teachers have time to look at data and make decisions for instruction around that data. So I think that's something, a bonus that we can leverage.
Well, he was excited. He said, I was used to Brooklyn, but I'm excited about going to Fairfield. So
Yes.
that made me feel good, you know,
Yes.
to expand the role. So I thought it was great. Well, thank you so much. Anyone else? Yes, ma'am, Ms.
If you don't mind, I'm going to just ask you a question about something you just said. The SIPS program,
Yes.
and you said that's for our intervention teachers.
Yes.
Is that something we're supporting countywide? Is there testing that goes with it and data collection? Because I know back in my day when I was an intervention teacher, we had a group of materials, and then the county decided it really wasn't giving us what we wanted, stopped supporting it. We went for a number of years without anything.
Right.
But are we doing that countywide with materials and testing, et cetera?
Yes, so the level directors had put SIPs in some of the schools, and so after we did our analysis of resources, what we found was that the schools were really providing interventions, and each school was planning their own program, which was great, and they were doing a nice job, but again, it went back to those resources. So they were getting their PALS data, they were getting beginning of the year assessment data, and then what? You know, what do you do?
Right.
So we did purchase that for every school in the division, and we will be providing professional learning to the reading staff once they get in, and we can certainly help any interventionist that's hired with other funding so that they understand how to use the program. And like I said, it very closely mirrors the PALS data, so once the students take that PALS assessment, then the SIPs can be closely aligned to where their areas of deficiency are, and then hopefully that will, you know, transfer back into the classroom for the instruction there.
Okay, thank you.
Dr. Castro?
All right. Thank you both. Thank you. All right, for the next item, we're pleased to present the Gifted Education Advisory Council's 2018-2019 Committee Report. And we have Dr. Chandra Floyd, our Gifted Education Specialist, as well as Chair of the Gifted Advisory Committee, Pierre Green, with us this evening to present that information. And we'll welcome them both.
Good afternoon, Mr. Vice Chair, members of the board, Dr. Cashwell. We're honored to share with you the 2019 Gifted Education Advisory Council update for Henrico County Public Schools. The Gifted Education Advisory Council met 4 times over the 2018-2019 calendar year. Based on the recommendations of the 2017-2018 School Board Report, areas of focus were created and pursued over the course of the school year. These areas included gathering and examining gifted student perspectives, revising the GAC bylaws, reviewing and discussing equity of student experiences in gifted programming across the division, and monitoring the Gifted Young Scholars Program at Wilder Middle School. One highlight from the year's work was the student focus group. The committee looked to gather a balanced representation of students from across the county, and therefore there were 4 middle school students and 4 high school students that were identified, and questions of interest were developed and vetted through the gifted education specialist. for inclusion in the student panel. Upon conclusion of the gifted student panel, a committee debrief and question and answer session were conducted. Thank you. A second highlight from last year's work centered on communication. Carolyn Lingerfeld, an elementary gifted resource teacher, provided a committee workshop on Henrico's communication supports for the gifted community. The presentation included a navigation review of Henrico's Gifted Parent News blog and associated links. Targeted articles, workshops, and other parent support services were reviewed with the committee. Another highlight involved the inaugural year of GISA. Brainstorming and discussions took place surrounding building a sense of community with the new students and their families within the newly formed Wilder community. Updates were shared by the gifted education specialists regarding staffing, numbers of applicants, curriculum opportunities, and plans for the 2019-2020 school year. One other highlight of the school year revolved around the council bylaws. Input was solicited from the committee to amend and edit the bylaws, and this work will remain ongoing throughout the course of this year. Based on the GIAC meeting minutes, the areas of focus you see here were generated by the 2019-2020 school year. At Wilder Middle School, GISA's establishment and growth will continue to be of interest. We will also be following up on issues of the social and emotional development of gifted students, equity in identification practices and services, and supporting twice exceptional learners, as well as gifted staffing concerns. These areas of focus were based on stakeholder input, comments, and meeting presentations from the 2018-2019 year. Thus, in light of the meeting notes documenting the work of the council in 2018-2019, the committee would like to ask for the board's continued support of gifted staffing increases. Specifically, GIAC requests a budget increase to support the addition of 2 gifted resource teachers per year to increase the number and diversity of gifted teachers, and the establishment of another gifted education endorsement cohort, this one with a secondary education focus. This will support future improvement in our gifted identification processes, support our efforts to staff GISA with appropriately endorsed candidates, and allow us to maintain an HCPS pool of educators holding their gifted endorsement across different levels and in different disciplines to ensure we can continue to meet the needs of all of our students. And with that, at this time, we would welcome any questions from the board. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Floyd. Board members, you've heard her presentation. Are there any questions? This time I will start to my left.
I do have.
Ms. Ogburn.
Are you sure? Okay, all right. On your third slide, it said that their student focus group, there was a committee debrief and a review of next steps for support. So I'm curious what the next steps for support that they detailed are.
At that meeting, we had kids identify, the biggest question was, if you're only identified in one area, how do we evolve that? Because if I don't test well in math or reading, but I'm good in art, how can I get resources?
Oh, okay.
And then we also talked about diversity among our teachers. When we look at our county, how diverse it is, we want to make sure that our kids can see themselves. As Dr. Tigan stated earlier with the mirror library set, that's something that's very vital, I feel, for our kids. Another highlight was parents that were not twice, their kids were not twice identified, providing services for those parents. We had a lot of parents say, I lived in one part of the county, I got a worksheet. When I moved and brought a bigger house in another part of the county, my services were amazing. Why is that? And so that was something that we talk about with equity across the board. I know Dr. Cashwell and her team is working on that.
Okay, all right. And so support from us basically would be continuing to increase the staff so that more students have more minutes with their gifted teacher, essentially, right?
Yes,
Is that right?
so that
Okay.
we're able to make sure that we have teachers fewer teachers with so many schools, basically.
Well, and the pupil-teacher ratio for gifted teachers is astronomical, so especially at the secondary level. So you're looking for support of another cohort. Are y'all thinking within the next year, 2 years? I'm curious what the consensus is.
We would love to get one as soon as possible. We have one that'll, we have one that will be completing at the end of this year. There are 10 teachers currently in that one, and hopefully if we could get another one rolling with the following year, that would be wonderful.
Okay, great. And just last question, I saw that you were considering changing your bylaws of the committee, and having been on that previously and been the board representative, and I know Mr. Pike is now, I'm curious where you're headed with bylaws changes.
Well, we noticed we had a lot of overlap. This is supposed to be a committee that's centered around community and family, and we had a lot of central office, so we took out some of the central offices. Wanted to make sure we had more parent slots. We actually submitted this to Wade last year and actually took a vote on it. If you look at the bylaws, they mimic what the new diversity and inclusion bylaws state. And so we just took out some of the, we don't need 4 high school counselors, for example. We felt like 2 would be ideal. 1 principal would be ideal, and so forth.
Okay.
And
So
those were some of the major
Mainly you're
changes.
looking at what the members of the
Yes.
committee and who comprise that, different representatives from
Right.
different districts, I assume.
Yes.
What is it, 2 now from each magisterial
3.
district? 3, okay.
3.
All right, now I'm curious, is that something the board has to approve when they change their bylaws?
Yes. I think there's also, one of the reasons we talked about it being ongoing is there's some other structural things we want to take into account and bring to the board for consideration on how, to bring it into alignment with some of our other advisory committees, SEAC and the Equity and Diversity Committee, for example, and maybe retool how some of those appointments, whether it's by magisterial district or, the involvement of school board members and things like that. But that's why it needs to be ongoing, because some of those, I can only make suggestions, and the board, I don't know exactly how GIAC operates, so as I send back my comments and they consider those, which ones will work for them. I suspect they will be back to you with some structural changes and some new bylaws.
Yeah, because I've had questions about the selection process, so it would be really good if that's updated, that you share that with us so we know, and then we approve it.
Yeah,
Okay.
they'll have to approve it.
All right, and then we have to approve it. Okay, thank you.
Mr. Pike, you have anything?
I appreciate all the work. It was my first year of being a part of this team, and there's a lot of interest and there's a lot of energy, and there's a lot of things that are under consideration each time that they sit down. I thought one of the interesting parts during the course of the year was always being able to hear from students, because they have a very unique perspective in terms of how all this flows and how all this works. So I hope that there will continue to be opportunities for student voices to be heard. I know we always hear from staff, I know we always hear from parents, but really seeing it from the student lens, I think, is very, very important as we move forward with this. And I think the other thing, and and this is not anything new, but from the National School Board Conference, there were some sessions we went to about who's being overlooked in schools. And, there's probably students in every school that are maybe just on the cusp, if they had a nudge or if they had somebody to take an interest in them, that could push themselves in this direction. And I would encourage us to keep looking and keep digging for those opportunities and trying to find those students that are right there on the edge and see what we can do to push them forward and to have some different experiences. So I know the second half of the school year was a tough run for this team, and I appreciate their perseverance and their fortitude, and I'm looking forward to seeing how these bylaws can be adjusted, but also digging even harder for students. And thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Scott? So, Ms. Floyd, thank you again, Reverend Green. So I kind of want to echo, I'm going to stop letting him speak before I speak. When he made the reference to who's being overlooked, my question, when you were hired in this role, for me personally, we looked at the numbers of children that were being identified, the number of opportunities in the districts, Verona and Fairfield and some of Brooklyn, and disproportionately, number one, the resources were not equally allocated. Number one, students were not necessarily being, the numbers of our children were not yielding the same numbers. And so we talk about identification, we talk about support. So I guess for me to you, as the person that, you know, in your resume, when I read it before you got hired, you seem to be very passionate about equity, and as far as all students with special, with gifted students. Can you kind of speak to me what your thoughts are going forward in regards to the equity in our county, so that no matter where you live, as Mr. Green said, there's consistency in information, consistency in feeder patterns, and making sure kids are even being, you know, kind of pushed in that direction. Can you just kind of, I know you can't give me it all, I don't want you to, but just help me feel good, and then we're going to talk later on about it.
Sure. I'm still learning a lot about the district and how they do things. I know that there is a very robust system that is already in place. Some of the things that I am just kind of brainstorming about have to do with finding students, maybe even in some of the pre-K centers in our Title I schools. In fact, I have a meeting to talk to Dr. Cassandra Willis next week to just kind of find out how those things are done, to see if there's an opportunity for kind of expanding how we push in even at an earlier age. The truth is that often in our challenged or economically disadvantaged families, a lot of the times the opportunities aren't there. And so if we can create the opportunities in preschool for students to see more than they would normally see, be exposed to more than they would normally be exposed to, there is that opportunity for them to more likely get identified. So I have some ideas about even starting sooner in possibly some of the Title I schools with encouraging that. Also, just finding a way to create champions out of the gifted resource teachers in their different schools so that they are able to be talent spotters as early as possible. That's really important as well. So those are some of the things that are on my mind.
Yeah, well, I appreciate it, and I thank, you know, Reverend Green for his work and his committee, and as well as you as our specialist. So thank you so much. Any other questions from up here?
Reverend Cooper.
Yes, sir.
When they give out committee assignments, choose gifted. Come on and join us.
I appreciate that. I'm looking doing that.
Okay.
That's all. Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, for the next item, I'll have an update on comprehensive redistricting and the Comprehensive Redistricting Committee. And Justin Briggs is going to come forth to provide that update related to the committee selection.
Good afternoon, Mr. Vice Chair, members of the board, Dr. Cashwell. At the last work session, a list of candidates for the Redistricting Committee was approved. Emails and phone calls were made by Cropper GIS to extend offers and confirm that the candidates were still interested in serving on the committee. After speaking with the candidates, all but 8 accepted the offer. We have provided a list of alternates to fill the available spots on the committee, and we request that you approve them so that we can move forward with the notifications. Do you have any questions?
Start right, Ms. Scott.
I don't have any questions. No,
Questions?
the only
Ms.
thing I
Ms.
have
Zagler.
is, I want to just publicly say to all those people who have agreed to be on the committee, I know some had to change, et cetera, just the appreciation we have for the time that they're going to put in. It's going to be a big amount of time, and we know that, and just appreciative of people stepping forward to volunteer.
Ms. Pike?
Same.
Yeah.
Ms. Briggs, thank you, and we look forward to you and others who are working diligently to ensure the success of this process. So thank you again.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, and as Mr. Briggs noted, we'll be seeking your approval on that committee later this evening at our monthly meeting. All right, next we'll have an update on the bond projects that are currently underway or are nearing completion. And Mr. Pritchard and Mrs. Moore are here to provide an update on the 2016 bond projects that are in progress or soon to be finished.
Good afternoon, Mr. Vice Chair, members of the board, Dr. Cashwell. Thank you for this opportunity to present these updated projects, where we are for these 2016 bond projects that are in progress. Currently, we have a number of items that are going on, and I would like to say, first and foremost, I want to say thank you to Ms. Moore and her unbelievable staff of what they've been doing to get these things up and going and manage all of her project managers. Being a month on the job and now going around to the different locations to see the progress that has, of where it started and what's been made and the diligence of these people. They've done an outstanding job on this, so thank you very much. Our first project would be Crestview Elementary School, the renovation project there. The building should be, the renovation completed and the parking lot work being completed by the end of this month. And where we are, I think some areas that were done, the work at the vestibule area, some other pictures taken. Some of these places are teetotal transformations, to say the least. I mean, it's just unbelievable work. The next one is our Skipworth Elementary School renovation. Our status on that project right now, the building renovation completed. The parking lot work is being completed. This too will be completed by the end of this month in August. Pictures there. I think our students have done a nice job of adapting to all of this construction work that's been going on as well. Pemberton Elementary School, it's in the final phase of construction. Its completion date is roughly around December 2019. But if you can see, that's a massive addition added on to that part of the school where it totally transforms the look of that building as well. Some of the bus loop renovations and improvements that have been made in that area and also in our main office area as well. Chamberlain Elementary School, it's in the final phase of construction. It too is looking at a projected end date of December 2019. One of the areas that I had a chance to go into on Tuesday was the new admin office area where it is totally transformed from one side of the school to the other, which fits into the parking lot mold right here in front of the school. So the cafeteria, I think they're looking at having.
Cafeteria
Yes.
the cafeteria itself will be complete. The kitchen will still have some work being done to it. So we've been working closely with food services to arrange a temporary serving area for the kids. And that is looking to be, the kitchen is looking to be available sometime in the October-ish range. But we are working with food services to coordinate all of that, as well as with the school administration.
And then the Seven Pines Elementary School renovation, it's in its final phases of construction as well with its completion date in October. So, I mean, we're all these projects we're going on at the same time with some different time constraints, but it's been interesting to see. The one thing I've learned within the course of this past week, a lot gets done within a week's period of time. It's amazing how much a school changes within that 1 week time. So some of the changes that have transformed into that school as well. Looking at it, making the main office with its ADA compliant ramp, it's changed the outlook of that school as well. Tuckahoe Middle School, it's in the final phase of construction with its expected completion date of October 2019. I think this is the one that I was the most impressed with and most blown away with when I visited that school. Haven't seen it before, and what it looks like now, it's just totally amazing in the transformation of that entire school, particularly on the outside for being a campus-style school.
That is our new bus loop, which will be behind the school now on the top left-hand corner. So we think that's a really great change that was very much in need at the school.
And as you can see with our renovated bathroom, I've got to get this thing in. It is very colorful. It is a transformation, to say the least. And then our Glen Island Elementary School 8-classroom addition, the only thing that we have remaining left on that is the punch list item, so it should be up and hopefully operational at the end of this month in August. I know that is a much needed relief. But I think those additions are, as you can see, it's really changed the look of that school as well.
That photograph is taken from the playground area, so that's in the back of the school.
Can I just say something real quick? It's amazing going from the size of that cafeteria to now, because I went in there for a program. I'm sure Ms. Cocken has lived it more than I have, but the cafeteria now is L-shaped. You walk in and you can go to the right. It's beautiful. I mean, real beautiful.
We're very pleased with it, and we hope the school is as well.
And then the next couple projects that we have that have started, the Holiday Elementary School expansion in the Brooklyn area. The POD approval has been approved. The bidding should begin this month, and the expected completion date on that is August of 2021, and we'll look forward to bringing you updates as that moves forward as well. The Tucker High School replacement, it's in the contract award process right now. The expected completion date of that would be August 2021, and that would be for the school aspect itself. We would still have another year of addition with the field part that would go on as well. Yes. And the Highland Springs High School replacement as well. It is in the contract awarding process, and its expected phase, both school and field, should be completed by 2021. You guys have any questions?
Board members, do you have any questions or comments this time? I'll start right this time. Ms. Scott?
Okay, thank you. Boy, y'all been busy, haven't you?
Yes, we have.
This is an exciting time and some wonderful projects. But I was wondering, could you please remind us what are the projects that are left on the bond referendum that our voters voted on that are not in a phase here? What do we have left?
So we have the Glen Island A Center.
Correct.
And we have the Adams Elementary School as
Okay,
well.
Adams
Renovation.
Yeah, renovation, yes.
Okay. Now, weren't we supposed to go out for a design bid this summer?
This summer, I do believe so, was it early September? September.
Yeah, we have been working on the RFP, working with Mac and his group to put an RFP together.
Okay, great. And what's our time frame for Adams?
Adams, the funds are released for Adams in 21-22, I believe it
Okay,
is.
so after we've got these, all these schools, and after we have the new A Center, and then, okay, got it.
Yeah. Adams
Thank
is in the last year of the
last year of it,
the
yeah.
5-year
I just needed to refresh my
appropriations.
brain and make sure that we all understood where these projects were and what was being done.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Cock. Mr. Pike?
I'm just so excited about Tuckahoe. I have to say, it's, you know, you're right. It is amazing how different it is, and nothing but happy people. And it is, you know, it's amazing when you go through something like that, and in the last 2 years, I have not gotten, but I've only received one phone call of concern with the whole project, and that in itself is amazing. And that was about construction noise, which you can't really do a whole lot about. So, but they did, amazingly enough. So kudos to your whole department. I'm serious. It is doing all of these at one time and fast tracking. Normally a bond, you know, you have about 10 years where you do all of these projects, and the decision was made early on to do these in 5, and it's incredible that it has, here we are just a couple years later, and they're about done. So I'm excited, and we'll talk about Tucker in a couple of minutes, I'm assuming, but,
Yes.
yeah, because we have some things, but, yeah, it's all good. All good?
Well, we want to express, I'm sure that I say this on behalf of all of my peers, first and foremost appreciation to our citizens of our county for first and foremost approving the meal tax, which again makes all of these projects possible. And also to you, Mr. Pritchett, for being baptized by fire. And, as far as the time frame from being hired to our schools opening, we thank you for your diligence and dedication, and always, Ms. Moore, for your stellar leadership and your employees and those persons in our division, amazing facilities employees who work hard on all of our projects and make sure that we try to come in on time and under budget, which is always appreciated. So thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
All right, and I echo the board's thanks to both of the individuals standing at the podium as well as their collective teams. The next item under Operations 8.02. Yeah, you might stay in case there are questions, but is an opportunity for the board to ask any questions that there must be related to this evening. I'll be seeking your approval to award a construction contract to SB Ballard Construction Company in the amount of $92,702,203.70 for the replacement of Tucker High School.
Is that it?
Yes. Should the
Thank you.
board have any questions?
Thank you so much, Madam
We'll be seeking your
Superintendent.
approval this evening.
We're going to go back right. Ms. Cock, I'm sorry, I started you last year. Mr. Pike, you first.
You have questions?
Okay, Ms. Ogburn.
Ballard, have we used them before? Because that's the winning.
I don't
I'm
believe
just
so.
curious.
Have we not?
We have not used Ballard before.
Okay.
We got good recommendations
Yes.
on them, and the architect reviewed their bid submission as well.
Okay, great. We're at the point where we're ready to get started, as you can imagine. Over the last, I think it started about 2 weeks ago, as soon as people realized, okay, we're getting ready to start school, which means things are going to be torn down and we're moving fast. Just a couple things I'd like to put on your radar you're going to hear about, and Mr. Pritchard's already received an email about this from me, but I'm going to just put it out there. And I've talked to Mr. Raymond this morning about it. If we're going to, and we're going down this road of doing this fast, and normally a high school, how long did it take Deep Run to be built, Mr. Pritchard, do you know?
2+ years.
Okay, and so we're looking at opening in 2 years at Tucker. And so I just want to put it on the radar that I think we're going to have to really be sensitive to the needs of the staff and the students at having to live in a construction zone, because Tucker is such a tight space that we're working with, and I'm already getting calls of concern from parents, but they're twofold. Everyone was copied on the volleyball team and their concerns about where they're going to practice, when they're going to practice. I think we're in a good place with that. I've been emailing students all morning and talked to Mr. Raymond, and I know John Carroll is on this, trying to find adequate space for all of our teams. And one of the things I told the volleyball players was, this doesn't just affect the volleyball team. I know that their practice time has been impacted and all of that, and again, a solution is in the works, but we're going to have to be really sensitive to every team, every athlete that has to practice in a place where there are no athletic facilities that are really accessible to them. So I know that Mr. Carroll and his team are working with all the high schools and middle schools to be cooperative. But Mr. Pike made a suggestion to me, I'm going to give him full credit for it, that we look elsewhere as well, either private companies in our religious community. There are a number of churches, for example, that have large gyms. There are other options other than just putting this on the backs of the other schools that we might need to find funding to, rent these places, do this, because Highland Springs is going to need it, Tucker's going to need it, and I think we just need to put that on the radar now. As this comes up, it's going to be there for Tucker for 3 years. And we can't just say to the kids, sorry, you have to practice at 10 o'clock at night. And that is not an option that we should consider. So that's thing number one. The other thing is lunch. It's a weird thing, but I've gotten calls from parents because I don't know if anybody else knows, but as Tucker, the plans for the renovation, they have eliminated one cafeteria. Used to have 4. Now, one of them is being used for other facilities.
PE.
And so, pardon?
It's going to be used for PE.
It's using for PE. So now they're down to 3 cafeterias to run all of their students through. I've heard from parents in the last week as the lunch schedule was apparently published. And the shortest lunch is 25 minutes, the longest is 30. The kids have just a couple minutes to get there. But the concern is you're funneling the whole student body into 3 cafeterias now. The lines would be even longer. The staff from the 4th cafeteria will spill over into the other 3, but I think we're going to have to give them more support in this area as far as the general functions of that building. And so as I've been talking to parents and students over the last week or two, it's become abundantly clear they're really worried about this. Especially the parents are worried about how their kids, because now lunch isn't going to even start until like, I think it's 10 minutes after 12 or something like that. Normally, high school students are so used to starting lunch early. They're going to have lunch later. They're even working on, going back to the kindergarten thing of having snack. They're really trying to figure out how to handle this problem. So I figure if I put it on your radar and that of Dr. Cashwell, we can help the staff deal with these very basic problems of living in a construction zone. We might talk to the folks down the road at Tuckahoe. They had a similar problem with having to funnel kids through half a cafeteria. I'm sure there's experience around with all these renovations going on and how to help this staff deal with it. And again, we may have to put, extra cafeteria staff in there to help shorten their lines, but they're looking at each lunch having each line, that's the information I've gotten, of having 50 to 75 kids to serve in 20 minutes. And that's basically impossible. So I feel sure if I put this on your radar now, hopefully we will, be able to help them out through it. And so the kids don't have to suffer for the decision the adults have made to fast track this in 2 years. So I appreciate your attention to that.
Definitely noted related to the cafeteria, and certainly if it's a matter of adding additional staffing to the cafeteria to assist, that's certainly something we can look at and prioritize. I will mention related to athletics, both at Highland Springs and at Tucker, John Carroll has been working carefully with the athletic directors as well as with Recreation and Parks on a plan, and so he's got a very good plan outlined, pretty solid through the fall and even through the spring. And I think right now some teams are getting a little bit of misinformation here or there depending on who's been to which meeting. And so he's going to put together something that will outline what those contingency plans look like so that I can share it with the full board. I'll do that through a weekly update, and I think that will help you all as you field questions. And while we certainly recognize, though, to your point, this will be a strain on both communities, and we want to make sure that we're doing everything we can to meet their needs. So as you're hearing of concerns, we appreciate knowing in advance so we can address them. Thank you.
Ms. Scott?
We had mentioned this earlier a little bit, but so the bid came in higher than than the amount that's in the bond referendum. So where is the additional monies coming from?
I'm going to step aside and let Mr. Sorensen talk about the financial part of this.
The money man?
Good morning, Ms. Cox, or good afternoon, Ms. Cox. So we do have some project savings that we plan to put forward to have money in place for these contracts. We have been working with the county on an involved plan, not only to issue the contracts, which is our immediate concern, but also to put money in place to fund the projects moving forward.
Okay, are we having to take from any of the rest of the projects for the bond?
Sure. At this point, part of the discussion is removing some of the money in place for the Glen Allen ACE Center, for the design of the Glen Allen ACE Center, which would delay that project.
How long will it delay the project?
Unfortunately, I can't give you a definitive timeline now. I just know that we are looking at restoring those funds as soon as possible, but to tell you exactly when that would be, I can't do that today.
Okay. Mr. Superintendent? I'm very concerned by that. You know, we actually started talking about the third A Center in 2007, and some board members, you know, went out there to Nevada, I think the trip was, and we understood that the need for it, and, you know, it then kind of fell apart with the recession, and that all makes sense, but the vision we didn't stray from the vision. When Glen Allen opened in 2010, the pad was set up, the area where it would be was fixed and ready for it, so that when we had the funds, that we could go ahead and start the design plan and move it forward. And what really worries me is that, you know, it's our students that we're doing a disservice here. You know, 1,900 students are applying to our 2A centers every year, and that leaves about 950 students without seats. And so, you know, we're talking about the different pathways, that there are other pathways out there. We're talking about life readiness. We are, you know, boasting the importance of the workforce development of soft skills, but we're not putting our money where our mouth is. And, you know, for 8 years, I've been representing the career and technical education programming for this board. And I've been, you know, working with your staff to help businesses to see the value of our program, to tell them how much we believe in them, and to have opportunities for our students. And just yesterday, we had a business council retreat, and these businesses were so excited to help our students, to bring in different machinery and mentoring and shadowing and such. But I feel like, you know, we've been telling them this is coming, this is coming, this is coming, and we've always put up a roadblock. And I don't understand, in this day and age, when we all know the jobs that are available out there, we all know the importance of soft skills and workforce development, putting this off for another year or more, because I know you couldn't tell me, because you don't know, and it really concerns me. And I feel like 8 years we've been moving in a direction, and we're right back where we started before I ever came on the board. Is there something else that we can do?
Certainly your concern is noted related to shifting funds, even if temporarily, that were allocated for that Glen Allen project could disrupt the timeline.
Yes.
I certainly haven't been given any indication that it would disrupt the project or cause the project to discontinue, but I think you raise a number of good questions that we can certainly get some answers for you on, but I'm not prepared to give you today. So certainly we can revisit some other funding models that might get us to where we need to be in relation to that amount of money, as well as look at what the timeline impact would be as far as being able to replenish those funds and stay on track with what was promised to the community.
Thank you. And Mr. Chairman, can you see if there's a consensus of the board? Because I don't want to be the lone voice out here. I'd really like to know what my colleagues, if they support this too.
Ms. Pike?
I do not disagree with Mrs. Cox's assessment. I think it is significant that we are in a situation where we are going to build 2 brand-new high schools. I think that's just an amazing accomplishment for the county and for the school system. But I also think that in working through that process, that everyone needs to be cognizant of how important it is, the funding piece, and to make sure that the funding is there and that it's adequate. We all know the perils of construction, the ups and downs of how a project is going to turn out and things that can happen. I'm always very appreciative of the collaborative work that's done between the Board of Supervisors, the county manager, the school board, and the superintendent. But these are really critical projects that we need to ensure for the future that the needs are going to be met for Tucker and Highland Springs and all the projects that are in between. And it's clear, any number of meetings that we attend as a board and as individuals, how important the future is in terms of career and technical education and all the things that are involved with that. So having that third center, as Mrs. Cox just outlined, is critical. But I think the other thing that we need to think about too, and we saw this earlier this afternoon, is reimagining the Virginia Randolph campus is a part of this as well. And so we've got some critical projects that are going to require significant funding as we move forward as a board, as we move forward in working with the county manager and the Board of Supervisors. So making sure that those funding mechanisms are there and that, you know, I understand the requests here with that preliminary funding piece, but it's too critical for the future. And we need to figure out how we can make that work without hurting looking ahead to the future. And I'm concerned about the Glen Allen piece, but I'm also concerned about the Virginia Randolph piece, because that is a critical piece of our future as well. And the public, you know, the public knows that. So, but I'm supportive of what Mrs. Cock outlined.
Thank you so much, Ms. Pike. Ms. Ogborn.
I would echo what Mr. Pike and Mrs. Cock have said. One of the things I think back to when you say that this might be delayed is when I went from meeting to meeting to meeting to meeting in 2016 for that bond referendum and advocated for passage of it. It was 86% pass rate, if I remember the numbers right. And the community told us what was important, loud and clear, and the ACE Center was right there up front. And for me to go from meeting to meeting and say to my constituents and outside of the three-chop district, and to say to them, 1,000 students every year are not being served. I said it at every single meeting. To know that that possibly would be delayed when we promised the voters 3 years ago it would not, causes me a tremendous amount of heartburn. That is something I don't think that we should go down that road. I can't imagine that we would be put in that position after promises were made 3 years ago. We're fast forward, we've got all these great projects that are winding up, and we've done exactly what we said we were going to do. And I think we need to stick with that plan. It's worked well for us for the last 3 years, and to do anything else is going back on what we promised the voters we would do. So I would recommend that as we go forward, which we have to, the voters approved it, and they approved it in a certain timeline, and they didn't say rob Peter to pay Paul, of course, but I think that this is an extraordinarily well-run county, and we can find a way. If maybe the heads need to, you know, all the money heads need to get together and think about it a little bit more to find a way that works for continuing on with a plan for the ACE Center, for Adams, and finishing up all of the bond projects. There were a number of projects approved in that bond referendum, not just school projects. So honestly, I'd rather us delay something else than something that serves as many students as the ACE Center does. And it is something that is, as Mr. Pike and Mrs. Cox said, is of a critical need for meeting the needs of our students in the future. Because we, again, at all of those meetings for the bond referendum information sessions, we talked about that workforce readiness. We hoped that we hammered that away, and so I'm really distressed to learn that this is even a possibility to delay it. Hopefully you'll come back to us and tell us it's not going to happen, but we'll stay tuned, I'm sure.
We'll absolutely report back related to what kind of a timeline delay this would mean for that project and whether or not there are any other viable alternatives for funding.
I just want to I think there is a kind of consensus. I think when you talk about mutual inclusivity and mutual exclusivity, that all of these concerns are not mutually exclusive, but mutually inclusive. I stated, I'm on record of saying, that after we had the analysis of our special education program, that when we talk about reimagining Virginia Randolph, we need a new Virginia Randolph. When you talk about the specificity of the needs of our populations that one building serves, you know, we've trying to put a square in a round hole peg. If you look at the fact that we're spending $31 million on Tuckahoe, $26 million on Halliday, you've got $10 million allocated for the design phase of of the new center, I think that we have to talk about them all, as well as Adams, kind of together and kind of think about it comprehensively. Because if I'm not mistaken, the reason that we're in this specific particular predicament is because the cost that we projected for the schools are not the cost that the bids came back for, correct?
Correct, yes, sir.
So it's like either you value engineer a building or you figure out ways to get the money. And to Ms. Cox's point, I feel that we're creative enough with the monies that we have as a county who determines the money we get to spend at schools. So we don't determine, you know, the allocation of the funding. We kind of have it dictated to us. But that being said, to Ms. Ogburn's point, collaboratively, we've gone out on a limb to the constituents saying this is what these funds will be used for. It's almost like we have to say we delivered what we said, because it's not conducive and it's not it's not dealing with our credibility in regards to. So I think we're saying we're not necessarily happy about it, but I think that we all feel that we can find some sort of way to make sure that it gets done. So I would be excited to hear about where and I don't want you to think we're going in on you,
Oh, I
because
understand.
we're
Yes,
not
sir.
going to kill the messenger.
Understand.
We're just saying that we know that this is critical because we just kind of learned that information. So, Madam Superintendent, I'm looking forward to your creativity with your staff, with the county staff as well.
Sure, and I would clarify just one point related to Virginia Randolph and reimagining that project. And certainly, we know that's one priority among several others that may show up on a future bond. But I think what I'm hearing collectively from the board is related to the 2016 bond referendum. And we saw a presentation this evening of where we are in completing those projects, and we understand what's yet to be completed and the timeline associated with both the Glen Allen Innovation Center and Adams Elementary. And the concern you're voicing is related to us pausing the Glen Allen Innovation Center project in order to shift those funds to the high school projects, which are part of that same referendum. So we will certainly take a look at other options, and your concern is heard.
Thank you.
Mr. Sorensen, thank you so much. Mr. Pritchard, thank you so much.
Sure,
Ms.
thank you.
Moore, again, everything I said prior to that coming up, I still mean. So thank you.
All right, thank you. And that concludes items from the superintendent.
Thank you, Madam Superintendent. We do appreciate that. The next item on the agenda is unfinished business. Board members, is there any unfinished business?
Apparently there is.
Ms. Cox?
Ms. Ogburn.
Oh, I'm sorry, Ms. Ogburn, I apologize.
Apparently, no, I'm sorry, it's under new business. I do have an item for new business, not unfinished, sorry.
So are you removing your,
Yes, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Yes, I
Never mind.
anyone else? That being said, board members, we do have a couple of items under new business, Ms. Ogburn, for our consideration. The first is an amendment to the superintendent's contract. Before considering the amendment, I would like to note that Mr. Montgomery, who is our board chair, is aware of the motion that we are going to amend and would be acted upon this afternoon in his absence. That being said, is there a motion to amend the superintendent's contract?
Yes, I move that the school board authorize the vice chair to execute a first amendment to the superintendent's employment agreement in a form approved by the county attorney.
Is there a second to his motion?
Second?
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The amendment is approved. Next is the approval of our school board meeting dates for the 2020 calendar year. Board members, you have before you a list this afternoon of those proposed dates. First and foremost, before we enact, is there any discussion?
Is this yours or mine?
That there being none, do I have a motion to approve the 2020 school board meeting dates as presented?
So moved.
Second?
It's been properly moved and second that we approve our school board meeting dates for the 2020 calendar year. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The 2020 school board meeting dates are approved. Mrs. Ogburn, is there any other new business?
I do. I have an item of concern. I've received several emails over the last week or so concerned, as parents and students have realized that the new school year is starting, they are all of a sudden realizing also that next year we have the ability to start school at a different time. So I'm now getting a lot of input and concern over whether we are going to start school before Labor Day next year. So I just wanted to put this on the staff radar and that of Dr. Cashwell. Their parents are concerned because they are now beginning to make plans for next summer. They don't know whether to let their kids go to camp or take a vacation, go to whatever. And so they're asking for not necessarily something we can't give them, which is a calendar, but haste in getting that calendar done as soon as possible. I know that the calendar committee will begin their work quickly. It has been suggested to me that maybe we phase in moving up the date just a little bit, that, you know, some people have suggested, as other school divisions do, that we'll start the middle of August. If we're going to do something like that, that we start just a few days earlier one year, the next year we take it all the way, whatever. But it's just, I think the message from parents that I've been receiving in the last week, that sooner is better as far as getting that decision made, and they would appreciate knowing it very loudly. I have had some people express concern about how and when they would find this out. Because the calendar committee, oftentimes we approve it at a school board meeting. It happens in November. They don't hear about it for a while. So I think distribution of that decision would be appreciated.
Madam Chair, before you respond, I want to give my peers an opportunity to echo or to say what they want with Ms. Arbor. Mr. Pike?
I remember seeing one email that went out regarding this, and you know, the concern that Mrs. Ogburn explained is there. I just hope that we can look forward and figure out a way to make this work. It's an opportunity for us instructionally in a lot of different ways, and I hear the concern loud and clear from parents. I just hope that we can work collaboratively together and with patience and figure out how to make this opportunity work for everyone. And I know that will be a challenge, but I hope that we can make that happen.
Thank you, Ms. Pike. Ms. Cock?
No, I concur with what my colleagues have said. I think it's exciting that we have the opportunity, and now it's time to have that conversation. And also, it would be really nice if we do determine to say, okay, it's not going to be the next year, we're going to do this 2 years from now. But the other piece that I do here too is that we need to do things regionally. You know, we have teachers that live in Hanover and Chesterfield and Richmond, and they do too. And it would be wonderful if our region could come together and come up with a plan.
Well, and plus with our cooperative programs, like with Code RVA and Maggie Walker and all of the other things that we participate in, we do have to work with other school divisions. So I'm assuming you're right, Mrs. Cox, that this will be somewhat of a regional decision. But I do hear our parents loud and clear that we need to help them be part of the process possibly, or give them a way to voice their concerns in a way we haven't done before with our calendar committee.
Well, I'm sure Mac Baden can probably appreciate this statement. You know, we're going to measure twice and cut once, and I do know, based upon how collaborative we are in our calendar process under Dr. Tigan, as far as year by year, she speaks about the collaborative effort regionally in which we try to do that for certain situations because we are cognizant of where persons live and where their students go. So I echo what you all say, and it's actually an opportunity because each year, you know, we call it the King's Dominion rule, right? And so now we have the flexibility and freedom to do that, and it's just great to have that ability.
Well, I even heard from a family who's trying to set a wedding date. And they're waiting for us to make a decision before that wedding date is set, and I understand that.
Well, maybe if you tell them the date, they'll invite you to the wedding. So.
Yeah, I was going to say, if we get invited to the reception,
That's
maybe.
it. I said, just go early, you know, just make it earlier, and then you can hedge all your bets.
Madam Superintendent.
Yeah, well, thank you to each of you for sharing sentiments as you've heard from your constituents. And I would just share that we've been hearing similar concerns and are incredibly mindful, I know as the calendar committee always has been, in ensuring that we do hear the voices of our parents and in relation to what works well for our community and for setting calendars for our students. I will note that we're absolutely considering a regional approach to this, but of course, each locality has their own considerations, but it's certainly something that's been part of the discussion, is making sure that, that our partners across the region are certainly aware of where we're leaning and what our committee is thinking, and we're tuned into where their committees are heading, so that that is certainly factored in. So while we wouldn't be ready to ask the school board to approve a calendar for the 2021 school year, 1920, 1921 school year, any sooner than the fall or the winter, as we would typically do, what I do think we can offer our families and our community is a statement that would let them know whether or not we would be moving for a pre-Labor Day start. And I can tell you that the will of the committee initially, and that's in response to regional discussion, would not be to move to a pre-Labor Day start for the 2021 school year, given the fact that we recognize this would not provide enough advance notice for our families, even if we were to adopt such a calendar today, but that it's certainly something they're considering for the 21-22 school year. And so the intent of the calendar committee would be to bring forward 2 calendars at that time. So while you would be looking to approve the 2021 calendar, we would also bring a calendar for 21-22 that could potentially have a pre-Labor Day start date, depending on where the committee lands, so that there would be plenty of advance notice for the community.
That's great. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Ogburn, for that addition. Is there any additional new business? That being said, there being no other new business, I would like to announce that the school board's next meeting will take place at 2 p.m. on September 12th here in the Newbridge Learning Center. The meeting start time may be adjusted if necessary. There being no further business, this meeting is adjourned.